Okay, so the ground offensive of the IDF inside Gaza seems to be imminent. Hours or days away. It's literally around the corner based on what the IDF is saying, based on what the media outlets locally in Israel is saying, and based on what the foreign press is currently getting briefed on. So there's a lot of chatter about the ground offensive being literally around the corner. Now, I want to explain to you why this hasn't happened yet and why it's kind of happening slowly. Now, there's a few reasons, and all of them are being taken into account. Number one, the IDF still wants to allow as many refugees to move from the north part of Gaza to the south part as they were instructed. In fact, today, the IDF started actually throwing leaflets from planes in order to inform the citizens to actually evacuate. But based on reports we're getting from Gaza, the Hamas and their authorities and their enforcers are basically preventing people from evacuating, either by shooting them, scaring them, taking away their car keys, etc., explaining to them that they will be banished if they leave, they will not be allowed to come back, saying that it's all fake news by the IDF. They're using all different types of kind of psychological warfare to get people not to leave in order to create a human shield for themselves. But as time goes by, more and more refugees actually make it to the south of the Gaza Strip, which is what the IDF is waiting for, to allow a little bit more time for the refugees to get out. Now, this isn't going to be forever, but for the meantime, it seems that the IDF still has patience. Now, the other thing is that the IDF is also looking at the weather conditions right now on the ground, and things are a little bit shaky. There's a storm front that went by, some rain, some clouds, etc., etc. So not the ideal time to start a ground offensive because of, aerial support and all that stuff. Again, one of the most interesting things that's actually happening right now is that Egypt also said, hey, we're not going to be taking any refugees. And you know what the reason that Egypt is giving is actually very interesting. Egypt is saying, look, we're not going to be taking any refugees because it's your land and you shouldn't leave. Because if you leave, you're going to lose it. Now, the real reason, in my opinion, why Egypt is refusing to take any refugees and open the crossing of the Rafah crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt is because the last time they've done it and they've allowed Palestinians to go over to the Egyptian side, what ended up happening is that they got an armed militia in the peninsula of Sinai, which almost started a war between Egypt and Israel by carrying out offensive against the IDF. So Egypt is not interested in the Palestinians. They explain to them that they should stay because it's their land, but in fact, they want none of this. In fact, there's literally 0 refugees from Gaza that were taken by the 22 different countries that are basically their brothers, which is kind of weird to me and does not get discussed enough. Whether you like Israel or you don't like Israel, whether you agree or disagree, the question here is why none of these other Arab countries who are so supportive of the Palestinian cause has not taken a single refugee. That's really, really strange, including Egypt. But that's a different topic for a different video. The other reason why the IDF is a little bit stalling on the attack is because they want to see what's going on the northern front. Because there's an option, there's always been an option that once this offensive, the ground offensive starts in Gaza, then the north side of Israel, which is the opposite side of the country, it's going to be basically a second front from which the Hezbollah and its militants will attack Israel by rockets, by infiltration of terrorists, etc., etc. The same kind of modus operandi that they got in Hamas. They pretty much copy-pasted it from Hezbollah. They have all these drones and all that stuff, and they're much more equipped than Hamas. They're a way better military force than Hamas, and it's going to be very, very complicated. They have about 130,000 rockets, high precision, high payload, that are about to do a lot of damage if Hezbollah decides to join this front. So it's a serious consideration. The IDF is trying to figure out whether Hezbollah is waiting for them to get into the Gaza Strip mess and then invade, or they actually are not interested. And when they make that decision, they're going to pull the trigger. But for now, they're trying just to assess the situation to figure out what's going on with Hezbollah. Now, the thing is with Hezbollah is that they've actually fired 5 anti-tank missiles just from this morning, which seems to be they're intensifying the operations, killing a few civilians, basically, based on what we saw from the reports from the local media over there in Israel. We have incursions going on over the past few days. We have drone attacks, mortar fire. So the heat is kind of getting intensified by Hezbollah on their side. And there's a kind of a tit for tat. The Hezbollah is trying to do as much as possible without crossing the line and declaring war. The IDF is trying to retaliate to show that they're not going to be pushed around, but also not to start a war. But this is a very, very, very dangerous game when you're playing this tit for tat. And it seems like for now, both sides are not kind of interested in a war situation tomorrow. it's very slippery slope. What I think the IDF is trying to figure out here is whether Hezbollah wants to be a pain in the butt, essentially pinning as much forces on the north of the border as possible without starting a war, or they're actually prepping for war. Once they figure this out, they're going to decide what to do as far as the ground offensive. It seems, based on everything we read out of Israel, that this threat from the northern front is taken seriously also by the United States, which sent 2 carrier strike groups off the coast of Israel, which is no slouch. So it means that the United States is prepping for a potential of a massive escalation of a regional scale, which means possibly Iran or Syria or Hezbollah, or maybe all the three. Now, the Saudis are actually staying out of this. They put out very generic statements that they want de-escalation, but they're not saying anything positive or negative about Hamas or Israel or none of this stuff. They're basically staying out. And I've explained why, because look, MBS, the ruler of Saudi, is a pragmatist. He's going to go to bed with whoever wins this. And if Iran wins this, maybe he goes with Iran. If the US and Israel manages to win this whole kerfuffle, then he goes with Israel and the United States. He's basically going to go with the winners. He's not taking sides at this point. Same thing with the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli Arabs. We have 2 million Arabs living over there in Israel. As part of the Israeli citizens, they're about 20% of the population. They go to universities, they work as engineers, as doctors, as Supreme Court justices, as they play for the national team and all the sports, etc., etc. So these guys, they were enticed by the Hamas, or at least attempted enticed by the Hamas to join the hostilities. They're refusing to do so this far. The Palestinian Authority also, which is governed by the PLO, is also refusing to join. So at this point, from the Saudi, the Palestinian Authority, and the local Israeli Arabs, it seems that they're not even close to joining this. So that front, at this point, seems to be very, very quiet. Now, Iran, on the other hand, is really increasing its tone. It's getting very, very heated up right now. First of all, it absolutely lost the mask of not being involved. They met with the leadership of Hamas, which is actually not in Gaza, surprisingly, in which they've discussed the cooperation and et cetera, all this PR fluff. But what they said today is that if Israel does not stop this until tomorrow, Iran is going to take steps that will change the map of the region forever, which is a massive threat. Now, they've also released a video in which they also dropped all the masks. In that video, you see all these proxies in the same video by Iran, which is Hamas, the Houthi rebels, the Hezbollah, all of them are in the same video, basically storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. So basically, they've essentially admitted that all of these are their proxy groups, which kind of we all knew at this point. Now, the Hamas here really has 2 choices when Israel starts this ground invasion. And I'll talk about the potential difficulties for Israel on this side, but let's focus on the Hamas side. What the Hamas can do here? Well, they have 2 choices, and it depends on what was the array of considerations leading to this attack by Hamas. If Hamas was trying to provoke Israel into some sort of another round of escalation, which will be over in a few days, then they will run. They will go to the tunnels and they will bail towards Egypt. They have massive tunnels which they can bail to Egypt, to Sinai, chill there for 6 months, and come back later and try to start this whole thing again. But if their end game from day one was to cause a massive regional war and drag Hezbollah, Syria, and Iran into this, and potentially the US and the whole thing, and basically ignite the Israeli Arabs and the PLO from the Palestinian Authority, if they're trying to cause a regional war, then they're going to stay. Because for them, they know that if they stay, the eventuality of this, that even though Israel is going to pay a hefty price, if they stay and fight, they will lose. I mean, they will cause a lot of damage, but they will lose and they will be gone. But if they're considering themselves as sort of a martyrs in what seems to be the final battle for the destruction of Israel, then they stay and they fight. But, this fight isn't going to go anywhere. Now, talking about the Israeli side of things, look, it's not going to be a walk in the park. Urban warfare is probably one of the most difficult things in existence for any military. Militaries that fight guerrilla organizations, by that definition in itself, are in a disadvantage. Urban warfare is even greater of a disadvantage. Urban warfare with massive amounts of population is an even greater challenge. Urban warfare, massive amounts of populations, and a massive tunnel, 300-kilometer tunnel system, which you have no idea where they're coming out of every hole, it's almost mission impossible. So it's going to be absolute hell over there and not an easy task. So what the IDF will have to do is, first of all, basically rely on the advantages that they have, which is air superiority, sea superiority. So they have to take over the shores of Gaza and basically shell it, basically that part they're going to invade. They have to basically bomb it from the air. They have to give a lot of air support through drones and through jets. And they basically have to carve northern Gaza away, just leave northern Gaza to themselves and push all the residents and everybody, the non-involved ones, the south of Gaza, so they can basically operate in some sort of a sterile environment where you kind of know that if you see anybody in the streets, that's a bad guy. That's the situation they have right now. It's going to be very, very harsh. Very, very harsh. Lots of dead civilians, lots of dead soldiers, unfortunately. Yeah, and if that's what the Hamas wants, that's the end game for them. They'll get it. But eventually, look, there's no way Hamas can win this, but they can definitely inflict a lot of damage and potentially ignite the whole region. And that would be kind of the, I guess, the nightmare scenario. Let me explain. Currently, the United States have 2 carrier strike groups off the coast of Israel. Now, those carrier strike groups are basically massive cities. Think of it like a frontal command post. They have auxiliary, supply, logistics, air support, intelligence, but they're there mainly for 2 things. They're not there to get involved in Gaza. That's not the point, and that's never going to happen. They're there either to rescue U.S. civilians and U.S. citizens, should the case arise. And also, if Iran or Syria or Syria-Iran or Hezbollah joins the fight and it becomes a massive global or regional war, a massive regional war, in that case, they're going to have to get involved and potentially provide some air support, some intelligence, et cetera, stuff like that, should the case arise. Now, look, that would be the nightmare scenario. If Hezbollah and Iran and Syria is getting dragged into this and this whole thing ignites, the U.S. will probably get involved in some capacity, and it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. Egypt and Jordan will probably not join this for a multitude of reasons, although everything is possible. We are talking about the Middle East. But at this point, it seems like Egypt and Jordan probably will stay out of this, but God knows. The best case dream scenario at this point for Israel would be that there's no second front in the northern part. There's no other fronts, and they get to clean house and get rid of the Hamas regime and basically let the civilians return and restart the whole Gaza Strip without the terrorist cells in it. And then deal with Hezbollah next, and then deal with potentially Iran next down the road, whenever that may be. And beyond the strategy on the ground and all this geopolitical stuff, I want to give a huge shout out to Palantir. Now, you guys know I'm a huge fan of Palantir. It's my favorite stock. It's my favorite company. I'm a huge fan of Alex Karp. Dr. Alex Karp is an OG. He came out today and put out a massive ad in the newspaper basically saying that Palantir supports Israel. That's already after he tweeted about it, even though I'm sure a lot of people didn't appreciate it. But Palantir is the sort of company that says what it feels, goes with its truth, and doesn't kiss ass, which is exactly what I am all about. So I appreciate Palantir, I appreciate Alex Karp, and I appreciate what they're doing to show their support for the right side of history here. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I just want to let you know this video is posted on my second channel. It's currently called the Tom Nash Podcast, but the name will be changing to This Changes Everything. It's going to be a brand new channel dedicated for these sort of videos. I'm going to focus my main channel on stocks, finance, and economy because that's what the 290,000 people who subscribe to that channel subscribe for. And it's not fair for them to put these videos on the main channel. But if you're watching this channel and you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, click that little bell so you get notified when I upload, because I will upload daily updates from the war in Israel, from any geopolitical developments from around the world. Thank you so much. So don't forget to subscribe on your way out. I'll see you in the next video.